looking forward to talking about that with you guys this morning. I've been here at CBTS for the last 16 years doing information security, and part of my role here is to talk to customers and hear about the challenges that they're facing as security practitioners, the issues that they encounter protecting their data and their assets. And so what we've tried to do is take comments from them and stories about what works and what doesn't, and really try to consolidate it into webinars like this to share the wealth and spread knowledge around to the security community at large. And look, one of the fundamental truths of being a security practitioner, one of the things that we hear from customers is, man, this is hard. And I think if you've been doing security for any period of time, you'd probably agree with that sentiment. No matter how much you might hear it from folks that want to sell you security gear, from ads that you see blasting in your face walking through an airport or on the side of a bus. At the end of the day, there are no shortcuts to doing effective security, right? You have to put in a great deal of intentional effort. It isn't something that you stumble across by accident. There's certainly no silver bullets. There's certainly no easy path. There are simple paths, right? And one of the things that we've tried to do, and what we're going to talk about today, is trying to make complex guidance simple for folks that don't have a PhD in security. We want to try to make the complex simple, but at the same time, we have to understand that none of it, even though it's simple, is going to be easy. It's going to be a formidable effort. Long-term projects are often required to put the right controls and defenses in place. Developing that map can be challenging, certainly, and we at CBTS feel that there are a lot of great security frameworks out there that help in development of that map. One of them is the CIS controls framework, which is some of the guidance we're going to be focusing on today. Now, why is that? Well, we at CBTS have been using the CIS controls framework and have been a member of the CIS Secure Suite for a number of years. We use this framework in our assessments. We talk about it to customers. We've actually designed our entire security portfolio based on this framework. And so we think this framework is very helpful for our customers. We think it has this really effective balance between accessibility to somebody who isn't a security PhD and also being comprehensive and actually covering everything that needs to be covered to protect your data and assets well. What do we mean by security controls? When we say that term, what do we mean? Well, I want to focus first on, our mission as security practitioners, which is to protect things that are valuable to businesses. And what I want to use as an illustration to maybe what's in your home. Think about the assets that you might be trying to protect that belong to you, the stuff that's important to you. Your car, your personal devices, your electronics, your valuables at your house. Things like that might be stuff that you have in your house, let's say, that you would want to protect, right? You keep it in your house because it's your place to store your things. And you feel probably relatively safe that my car's in my garage and probably not going to get messed with a whole lot, or my laptop's in my bag, and as long as I have my bag with me, or my jewels are in my safe or in a jewelry box, or if my kids like taking my wife's jewelry and leaving it like under their bed and stuff, that happens every once in a while. There are risks, I think. And the reason that we are concerned about our stuff, our valuable stuff, is a lot of times we're concerned about the risk of it, of something happening to it, right? We're concerned about the risks of fire in our house. You maybe are concerned about someone breaking into your house and taking things. There are all kinds of, risks to our valuable stuff. At the end of the day, as security practitioners, that's what we're doing. We're protecting our valuable stuff. What kind of valuable stuff do you have in your business, right? As information security practitioners focused on protecting information, often for many of my customers, when I ask them this question, that's the thing that they talk about. Well, we have this trove of personal information or of medical information. We have our intellectual property, our secret sauce, our source code, our strategies and sales plans, our some financial industry folks who work a lot in the financial industry, right? And financial information, cardholder data, bank records. Those are all incredibly valuable, and that is what we're trying to protect from the threat actors that are coming after us. So let's take this illustration one step further. Again, if we're talking about the idea of security controls, ultimately, that idea is meant to, to describe the set of things that we put in place to protect our valuable stuff from risk. And so now we're back to, talking about protecting a house. And let's think a little bit about some of the things that we do to protect our house, right? We might have some security policies about our house, right? I tell my kids security policies about our house, except I tell it to them in the form of, hey, if somebody rings the doorbell, what? Look and see who it is and see if you recognize them before you open the door. If somebody asks to come in, you come and get us. When you leave the house, you lock your door. Maybe you have a security system, and so you arm the security system when you leave. These are all different policies that you would have in place. But policies are useful only if you have technical controls to back them up, right? The door lock that I tell my kids to lock when they walk out the door in the morning to go to the bus, that's a technical control. That ensures that unless you have the key, you can't open the door and get in the house, right? Same with the windows. Surveillance systems, those are not a protective control, right? But they are a detective control. They're a control that detects threats. I have protective controls in the safe that I have that has our valuable paperwork in it, right? Even in my house, I have, a guest wireless network. So I want to allow guests to use our internet connection when they're at our house, but I don't want them to be on our production wireless network and potentially interfere with our machines or maybe allow something that's malicious on their machine to probe stuff that's on my network. So think about, all the technical controls that you have in place, and now equate that to a set of technical controls that you might have in your business. And this is the idea behind the CIS controls framework. It is a relatively comprehensive, we think, list of technical controls that you should have in your business, right? So this control suite actually was originally released by the SANS Institute back in 2008. And a bunch of, government, US government entities, as well as tech companies and security researchers all got together and built this framework with the goal of providing this comprehensive list of control categories. And in 2008, there wasn't a ton of that going around, and everything that was out and available for consumption and use by security practitioners was just tough to digest. And so they wanted to build something that was comprehensive, but also approachable, right? And so what they did was build this best practices framework. They came together and had a consensus discussion to say, what do we think are the most effective and valuable security controls that a business can have, or an organization can have, regardless of what they do? And let's make sure that it connects to several other security controls frameworks, regulatory compliance suites. As the controls framework has evolved over the years, and now we're on version 8, and now the framework is owned by the Center for Internet Security and maintained by that community, again, of which we are a part, so we've contributed to this list here. And we find it's incredibly useful, again, because you can reference other control frameworks, right? You can say, hey, if I have to, show someone that I'm HIPAA compliant or PCI compliant or ISO 27000 compliant or NIST cybersecurity framework compliant, right? Maybe I have to demonstrate some of these to my cyber insurance provider or to a third-party auditor. I can assess myself against the CIS controls framework and see how I'm doing in each of these 18 areas. And then I can say, okay, well, here's the equivalent set of controls in another framework. So that we think that's incredibly useful. At the end of the day, we like this framework and we recommend it to customers because it helps them answer the question, what are the security controls that I really need? Not the business down the street, but me, my organization. What security controls do I need? One of the ways that we can help answer that question with this framework is by narrowing down the set of controls that we actually need, right? Because while there's 18 control categories here, there's a lot of additional controls inside those categories. So inside of these categories, the requirements that we have to follow can be pretty stringent. So the controls framework gives you an opportunity to reduce the number of controls that you might need based on the size and scope of your business, right? So if you're a small pizza shop, you don't have a lot of IT staff or any, you have low sensitivity of data, you might say, look, I'm a group one, implementation group one type of company. And that means out of all the controls in the CIS suite, or in the CIS controls framework, only 43 of the subcontrols or safeguards apply to me. So that means I only have 43 things I need to do to be compliant. 43 is still a lot though, right? Well, not as much as if you're in group 2 or group 3, right? So the bigger, more complex the business, the more you have at stake, the more requirements you have to follow. So this is a great framework. It's comprehensive. There's still a lot to digest. So what we at CBTS like to do, again, is try to make complex security concepts simple and approachable for businesses and partners of ours and customers of ours that aren't experts at security. And so what we wanted to do was try to take this set of controls, this guidance, and repackage it and reorganize it so that it would be more easily approachable and easier to digest for folks that just want to understand what they need to do to protect themselves. And so that's how we came up with the top 7 security practices. So we've taken hundreds of security requirements that have been reduced to 18 categories, and we've taken them down a step further to a set of concepts we call the top 7 security practices. And here they are. I mean, nice and slowly, as PowerPoint is rendering them. The 7 security practices that we say are essential for any business. And they are enterprise vulnerability management, protecting your data, protecting your network and your cloud, protecting your computing devices, protecting your users, protecting your apps, and finally, security monitoring and incident response. And we think if you're doing these 7 things in any capacity, we think that you're making good strides towards a strong security program. But we think mastering all of these 7 areas is really what makes you hard to attack. And folks, that's what we're after. In 2021, as security practitioners, our role is not to be invulnerable. We can't be invulnerable. We can't stop every attack that we're ever going to face. Again, back to the house illustration, if somebody wants hit my house bad enough and they can't get in through my doors or windows and they can't talk their way in by convincing my kids they have ice cream or whatever, my kids would do pretty much anything for ice cream. They got to find some other way in, and they could. They could drive a bulldozer through my garage, and it would be pretty destructive, and we'd notice. But if they wanted to get in badly enough, there's a way in. Now, the same is true for cyber attackers. And I'm here to tell you that you can't be attack proof, but you can be so hard to attack, so expensive, so frustrating, so time consuming by following these practices that the attackers will give up after trying for a little bit and move on to the folks down the street. And that's often the best that we can do as security practitioners in 2021, given the threats that we face. So with that said, let's talk about each of these practices and which CIS controls they're made up of. And the first is the idea of enterprise vulnerability management. What do we mean by that? Well, we mean identifying and addressing and tracking the vulnerabilities in your assets. A vulnerability, right, is simply a flaw in an asset and something that can be leveraged or used by an attacker to impact it in some way. In security terms, typically we're talking about confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And so an attacker can impact the confidentiality, availability, and integrity of an asset by exploiting a vulnerability. That might be in a machine, right, by attacking weak configuration or maybe a missing patch or a software bug, or maybe in a person. So our job as security practitioners is to perform continuous vulnerability management, which is outlined by CIS Control 7, and to perform penetration testing. Continuous vulnerability management really means continually reviewing our environment regularly, typically on a monthly basis, to identify our vulnerabilities and to correct them. And penetration testing is really validating our security strategy by simulating real attacks, real world attacks. I like to use the chicken gun analogy. aviation researchers would often test whether or not their windshields on their aircraft were strong enough to withstand birds hitting them while flying through the air by actually shooting chickens at the windshields while they were testing them to see would they be resilient. And that's really what a penetration test is. It is validating whether or not your security strategy and the hardening that you've done in your environment is sufficient to repel attacks. So that's something that we offer as a service. And we also offer services like managed vulnerability scanning and patching, cloud security posture management, with the idea that you need to be continually monitoring your environment for threats, but sometimes it's hard for an organization to take that on if they aren't specialized in security or have the resources or tools. The second essential practice is to protect your data. And your data, again, should be, for most organizations, is the most valuable thing that they hold, right? If it gets out, there goes the brand, there goes your customers, there goes trust. So, first off, we think, making sure that the data that you have is protected from loss by data recovery tools like backups are essential, right? And I don't know a customer, honestly, that doesn't have some kind of a backup system in place, right? This is the world's oldest technical security control. We think that, good backups, reliable backups are essential, especially if you're dealing with threats like ransomware as a last line of defense, not as a first line of defense, but also ensuring that your data is well protected and that you are aware of who is accessing it, who should be accessing it, and what they're doing with it, and where that data sits. And then putting right access controls in place. Control 6 in the CIS framework is access control management, making sure that restrictions are in place to prevent unauthorized use as well as misuse, right? We're not just talking attackers. We're talking about employees that might inadvertently use your data in an unauthorized or harmful way and expose you to loss. Plenty of ways that we can talk about protecting your data, but we think that this one is pretty high on the list because, again, of the core role of a security practitioner in protecting, what matters most to the business. Next is protect your network and your cloud. And I know most organizations' networks look very different than they did 5-10 years ago, maybe even 18 months ago, right? When now all of your assets many of your assets may be scattered and remote, and it may be harder to figure out where my data sits, where are my users, what's impacting them, are they visiting malicious sites, are they getting malicious emails, and so there are tons of important practices that are involved, from protecting your email clients and web browsers, from stripping out malware from traffic, stopping it at your perimeter, stopping it in a layered defense, as traffic moves closer and closer to your endpoints. And then ensuring that you're actually configuring your enterprise assets and your network devices well, and you're hardening them. And then monitoring the environment for threats and looking for suspicious activity. This is quite an involved effort. Certainly it's more complex than it was years ago because of how many of our applications and assets are spread all over, are hosted in the cloud, maybe running with service providers that we don't directly control. And so that means that you have to think in a more sophisticated manner about layering your controls and your visibility in place in your environments to ensure that you've got complete coverage and you know what's happening in the environment. The next is protecting your computing devices. And so, that means, again, ensuring that all of your computing devices, not just servers and workstations, but hypervisors, mobile devices, peripherals, appliances, anything that has an IP address, is protected from threats, right? And this is what your attackers are typically going after, right? They're trying to gain some kind of control or privileged access to your endpoint devices, your servers and your workstations and your network devices, so that they can get to the data that they want, they can run the code that they want. And so we as practitioners are charged with protecting those endpoints. The problem is nowadays just, stacking up endpoint protection tools and agents often, leads to a confusing mess of tools to manage and operate. And maybe at the end of the day, we're not even sure that the 6 agents we have running our machines are actually still going to stop that ransomware code or the attacker trying to steal credentials from us. So honestly, I think a lot of our customers struggle with just going back to the basics, inventory of their assets, making sure that they know where their assets are, what's running on them, who owns them, what data is on them. But at the end of the day, I think this is the one that gets the most focus from traditional security and IT practitioners, right? We know, well, hey, we need to run anti-malware tools on our endpoints. Well, that's not all we have to do. There's a lot more involved. And so that's where a lot of our managed services have come from, and our consulting work has come from in this space to try to help lead customers towards a more comprehensive view of protecting the endpoint. We see protecting users is incredibly important too, right? Users are often thought of as the weakest link in security, and ensuring that users know how to protect themselves. They know how to identify threats and report them. They know what their responsibilities are, and they are really assisted with tools that can help protect their credentials, which often is their identity and their ability to impact and use the networks in which they operate. So what this covers is account management, making sure that we're protecting the user accounts in our environment, and awareness training, and making sure that our users are well trained about the most recent threats, and making that an actual practice, a cycle, something that we don't just do once in a while, but that receives continual focus in our organization. Our applications, right? The reason that we have a network and our users are using things on our network is incredibly important. And we think, inventorying your assets is important, as well as protecting assets, your application assets that you build in-house, as well as the ones that you acquire from third parties. I know supply chain security has been on a lot of our customers' minds, worried about, can we trust the code that we're getting and the tools we're getting from our IT providers? Can we ensure that they aren't, compromised at the source like they were with SolarWinds, or, that a managed service provider isn't pushing out, malicious code without knowing it, like happened with Kaseya. So what we've tried to do is ensure our customers trust us and our capabilities by demonstrating to them over and over, and we've done this for years in our managed services practice, that we vet the tools that we use, and the approach is sound and transparent to our customers. We think that giving your applications this kind of attention, right, and ensuring that you can trust the code that they're running, and that they are not going to be an exposure, and instead they're going to operate to serve your users, is important. So cataloging, managing your applications well, and then protecting them from threats is this practice. And the last one really is security monitoring and incident response. So, right, what are we talking about here? We're monitoring your environment to identify if threats are there. Often when I ask my customers the question, hey, would you know if an attacker was in your environment now? How would you know? What tools would show you that? What data do you have, data points do you have at your fingertips, or that you are a few clicks away, that would tell you whether or not there was an attacker in your environment, or at least some suspicious activity was happening in your environment? Folks, answering this question is absolutely essential. And while it's number 7 on the list, it's still incredibly valuable, because we think if you aren't doing this, if you aren't able to spot malicious activity in your environment and respond, a lot of the other stuff that you did before this doesn't really get you a whole heck of a lot. There's a chance that you missed an attacker, or miss a threat that's in your environment, just one, and that can put you out of business. A lot of organizations put a lot of technical controls in place, preventative controls, but aren't monitoring for the threats that get past those controls. And so we think that that's essential. And being able to respond when that happens, having a plan in place, and moving through that plan and testing that plan regularly to make sure it's still relevant, and that the people that need to be in the know to perform incident investigations and respond effectively, so that the impact of the business is minimal, that those people still know what to do and are still ready. So we can help certainly with a lot of those areas as we've listed here. So those 7 areas are what we think that every business should be doing. So why aren't they? Why is this challenging? Again, I talk to customers all the time, and the things that I hear are, 1, there isn't an overarching strategy. right? We've put some technical controls in place. Maybe we've bought all in on one service provider or one vendor's platform. We say, I'm going to get all my tools from them and I'm going to be okay because I've got a great suite from this one vendor. Or maybe you go the other direction, a piecemeal strategy, where we're picking best of breed and we're grabbing items off different spots on the shelf. Either way, a fully technical approach, one that only relies on technical controls and not on policy or process, not on a strategy that is tuned for your business, that deals with your specific risks, will leave you with gaps. We also see folks that are using the right tools and they might have a strategy, but they aren't using the tools well. There isn't process rigor. They don't have the right configuration of those tools. Maybe they aren't doing patching or vulnerability scanning often enough. Maybe the data that they're collecting for their security monitoring effort is not comprehensive enough. We also see plenty of organizations that are just missing people, right? And this is, I think, a problem everywhere. Dedicated security staff are expensive. There aren't as many resources in the market as we would want. And so, trying to hire that staff often is very hard. Okay, lots of challenges, lots of things that we need to do. How can we help? Well, what we saw in talking to customers about these challenges and talking to customers about all these practices we think that they should be doing is we have an obligation to build a set of services that will help close that gap for our customers. And so that's what we've done here. One of the reasons we're holding this webinar is to announce this Essential Security Services Suite. What we want to do is present a set of managed services to our customers that will help address this set of gaps: vulnerability scanning, patch management, threat detection and response, multi-factor authentication, endpoint protection, and managed backup. So we've been offering these services for a long time, and we have a lot of customers who are relying on us week in and week out to provide them with security. What we want to do is present this set of options to them as a package to say, let us handle your security operations for you. Let us relieve you of the operational burden of performing these security practices. And instead, you can rely on us, a set of experts, a single outsourced security team, running the best of breed technology to provide these practices for you, right? And really our goal there is to help meet our customers' needs. In a couple of areas. One, with audit. We know a lot of folks are getting asked by cyber insurance providers to provide proof that they're doing some of these practices. And so coming to a single vendor really reduces the impact of just saying, hey, CBTS, talk to my auditor, tell us what you're doing, detail out the ways that you're doing these practices. From a financial perspective, there's a lot of value too in coming to us as a single source provider, and not having to try to build and run your own security team and build and run your own security practices. Those tools that might be obsolete allow us to build and run them for you and to keep them up to date. Using intelligence helps us provide better detection. And we're able to get great threat intelligence from the other customers that we use, from our vendors. We've got hundreds of vendors that we work with. And we're able to incorporate that into our detection tools so that we get better results. We can identify threats that you might not find otherwise, and we can report them to you. And we keep that cycle going, right? As we have better detection from one customer, we're able to apply the threats that we've seen in their environment to detection elsewhere in an anonymized and safe fashion, so that your data isn't exposed and your security status isn't exposed, but you're able to take care of the advantages of having streamlined threat intelligence. And finally, scalability. We find that customers, as they grow their businesses, often outgrow their security program, and that's been a challenge. Keeping pace with not just changes in network as customers move out of a centralized building and to work from home environments, or as applications move from on-prem data centers to SaaS applications. What we think is, what we've seen our customers deal with really is, the explosive growth that security doesn't often keep pace with. So let us keep pace for you, and build and grow your security platform as your business grows. If all this sounds great, cool, that was the idea. We want to be able to help, again, relieve the operational pressure of running a bunch of different security practices. So we'd be happy to show you a demo. You're welcome to reach out to your CBTS account rep or just email us at security@cbts.com. The last thing I want to talk about is building a strategy based on the CIS controls. I'm going to go back to the beginning where I mentioned the CIS controls framework is a fantastic guide for any business that wants to build a security controls strategy. What security tools and techniques or tactics should I have? What should my stack look like? Do I have the right security controls in place? Am I doubled up on effort else in places that I don't need to be? Do I have significant gaps? Am I spending my money well? These are all questions that we get all the time from customers. And this workshop is a really easy way to help answer those questions. Sitting down with folks from my team, my sharp as heck consultants that have been doing this for years, to talk through the CIS controls and build a strategy. Understand what's my implementation group? Which of those three groups that I mentioned earlier, 1, 2, or 3, do I fit in? And then which of the security controls do I have in place and what maturity level do I have today? And then documenting that in a tool that you can then use going forward. It's your tool, your dashboard, your web-based reporting app to be able to look at, hey, where are we today? Let's keep it up to date. And this becomes your security strategizing tool set that you can use to present to your board or to leadership or to set goals for your security team. Again, we think it's a great way to build a standards-based strategy and identify your gaps. And so we'd love to talk to you about that. You're welcome to reach out to security@cbts.com. Well, folks, hopefully this was helpful. We've hit it about half an hour, so we have a couple of minutes for questions.
So Justin, we don't have any questions at this time, but if anyone has any questions that they think of afterwards, please feel free to reach out either on cbts.com or you can email me directly. Also, Justin put up was it sales at CBTS?
Security
sales.
Security@cbts.com. Or me. I'm right here. I'm justin.hall@cbts.com. You're welcome to reach out. If you have questions, I'm on Twitter at Justin Hall, LinkedIn, a couple other places. So love to talk to you about this. If your business is looking to build that security strategy, or you just want to, tell me why my security control suite was wrong. And hey, we're practitioners. We'd love to discuss that, and I'd love to talk about it with you. Thanks for joining, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.